every year around January and May and July and August and October, I seem to get really depressed. And I got a lot of cute little paper notes, and I haven't looked over it in a year. So, page 1. Automatic thoughts and distortions. Although we're each capable of thinking reasonably about upsetting events, sometimes our automatic thoughts are distorted or unreasonably negative, occur so rapidly that we hardly notice them, let alone stop or challenge their logic, and replace them with thoughts that more closely align with reality instead of thoughts that depress. Yet these automatic thoughts profoundly affect our moods and our sense of worth. Distortions fall into 13 categories. Using them will be a very powerful tool in building self-esteem, assuming. In these circumstances, we assume the worst about testing the evidence. For instance, an example would be, John assumes that the boss scowl meant that he was very angry with John. John could have tested this assumption by simply asking, "Boss, are you angry with me?" Assuming self-talk would also be when you tell yourself, "I know I won't enjoy myself," or "I know I'll do a lousy job even though I'm prepared." Although more reasonable self-talk would be, "I might or might not enjoy myself or do a good job today. I am willing to experiment and see what happens." Shoulds, musts, and oughts. Shoulds are demands that we make for ourselves. For example, I should be a perfect lover. I must not make mistakes. I should be happy and never be depressed or tired. I should have realized sooner. We think that we motivate ourselves with such statements. Usually, however, we just feel worse. Since I should be so-and-so and I'm not that way, I then feel inadequate, frustrated, ashamed, and hopeless. Perhaps one of our only reasonable shoulds is that humans should be fallible, just as we are given our background, our imperfect understanding, and our present skill levels. If we really knew better, if we clearly understood the advantages of some behaviors, we were perfectly capable of behaving that way, then we would be better. One solution then is to replace the shoulds with woulds or coulds. The examples would be, "It would be nice if I did that. I wonder how I could do that." Or replace shoulds with want tos. "I want to do that because it is my advantage, not because someone else is telling me I should or I must." Ooh, I love this one. The FairyTale Fantasy. The FairyTale Fantasy means demanding the ideal from life. This is a really special type of should. Or why would that have happened? Why would that have happened often means the world shouldn't be the way that it is. In reality, bad or unfair things happen to good people, and often randomly. Sometimes because of the unreasonableness of others, and sometimes because of our own imperfections. To expect that the world would be different is to invite disappointment. To expect that others treat us fairly when they often have their own ideas about what is fair is also to invite disappointment. Repetition. I see you. Again, a would or could is a wise substitute for a should. It would be nice if things were ideal, but they are not. Too bad, now I wonder what I could do to improve things. I should stop doing that. All or nothing thinking. With all or nothing thinking, you hold yourself to the impossible standard of perfection, or something close to it. When you fall short of this standard, you conclude that you were a total failure as a person. For example, if I'm not the best, then I'm a flop. If I'm not performing perfectly, I'm a loser. If I score below a 90%, I am a failure. No, you're not. This is unreasonable because such absolute black and white extremes really exist. Even if it were possible to perform perfectly, and it isn't, performing below some standard usually means we performed at 80%, but really 0. And poor performance never makes a complex person worthless. Overgeneralizing. Overgeneralizing is deciding that the negative experiences describe your life completely. For example, I always ruin everything. Oh, I'm terrible at art. I always get rejected in love. No one likes me. Everybody hates me. Such global statements are unkind, depressing, and usually inaccurate. An anecdote is to use more precise language. Some of my skills are not yet developed. I am not as tactful as I'd like. Sometimes people don't approve of me. Be a healthy optimist. Expect to find small ways to improve situations and notice what's going well. Labeling. Here you give yourself a name, as though a single word describes a person completely. For example, I'm such a loser, I'm dumb, I'm boring. To say I am stupid means I always, in every way, am stupid. In fact, some people who behave quite stupidly at times also behave quite intelligently other times. Humans are too complex for simple and fine labels to behaviors. Dwelling on a negative. Suppose you go to a party and notice that a guest has dog poop in his shoe. The more you think about it, the more uncomfortable you get. In this distortion, you focus on the negative aspects of a situation while ignoring the positive aspects. Soon, the whole situation looks negative. Other examples. How can I feel good about the day when I was criticized? How can I enjoy life when my children have problems? How can I feel good about myself when I make mistakes? A solution to this habit is to re-examine your options. Would I enjoy things more if I choose a different focus? What pleasing things could I still find to enjoy? What would I think on a good day? How would someone with sound self-esteem view the situation? Rejecting the positive. Suppose you had an unusual magnifying glass that magnified some things, like your faults and mistakes, or the strength of others, and shrunk your strengths, the mistakes of others. For example, you think to yourself, I'm only a housewife and a mother. Minimizing your strengths. Rich, bright, loyal. Magnifying other strengths. Your friend replies, but you're an excellent homemaker. You've been great with your kids. Jane's an alcoholic. To which you respond, yes, but minimizing others' faults and your own accomplishment. Look at the cases she's won. She's the one who really contributes. A way to challenge this distortion is to ask, why must I compare them? Why can't I just appreciate that each person has unique strengths and weaknesses and other contributions, all not necessarily better, but just different? Catastrophizing. Catastrophe. When you believe something is a catastrophe, you tell yourself that that is so horrible and awful. In telling ourselves this, we convince ourselves that we are too feeble to cope with life. Although many things are unpleasant, inconvenient, or difficult, as Albert Ellis said, we really can stand anything short of being steamrolled to death. So One must think, I didn't like this, but I suddenly can't stand it. Anticipating a problem and formulating an action plan increases one's sense of confidence. Personalizing. Personalizing is seeing yourself more involved in negative events than you really are. For example, a student drops out of college and their mother concludes, "It's all my fault." A husband takes the full responsibility for his spouse's fatigue or anger. Here the ego is so involved that each event becomes a test of worth. There are two helpful anecdotes for this distortion. Distinguish influences from causes. Sometimes we can influence others' decisions, but the final decision is theirs, not yours. Look realistically at other influences outside of ourselves. For example, instead of thinking, "What's wrong with me? Why can't I do this?" one might say, "This is a difficult task. The help I need isn't here, it's noisy and I'm tired." Instead of thinking, "Why is he snapping at me?" one might say, "Maybe I'm not this central character. Maybe he's mad at the world today." Blaming. Blaming is the opposite of personalizing. Blaming puts it all on something outside of yourself. For example, "He makes me so mad. She has ruined my life and my self-esteem. I am a loser because of my crummy childhood." The problem with blaming is that it tends to make us think of ourselves as helpless victims who are too powerless to cope. The antidote to blaming is to acknowledge outside influences, but to take responsibility for your own welfare. Yes, his behavior is unjust and unfair, but I don't have to turn bitter and cynical. I am better than that. Notice that the person with the self-esteem is free to assume realistic responsibility. However, when one takes responsibility, it is for a behavior or a choice, not for being bad to the core. Thus, one might say, "I performed poorly on that exam because I did not study enough. The next time I will plan better." There is no judging to the core self here, only behaviors. Making feelings fact. Making feelings fact is taking one's feelings as proof of the way things really are. For example, "I feel like such a loser. I must be hopeless. I feel ashamed and bad. I must be bad. I feel worthless. I must be worthless." Assuming shoulds. The FairyTale Fantasy. All or nothing thinking. Catastrophizing. Overgeneralizing. Personalizing. Blaming. Labeling. Making feelings fact. Dwelling on a negative. Unfavorable comparisons. Rejecting the positive. Sometimes just make a list of your own insecurities. Insecurities might be related to various abilities in certain areas, classes in school, body image, fears, etc. Share with another person what your insecurities are, and in return, they might share with you their own insecurities. By listening to others share what makes them feel insecure may help you learn how to have empathy. Can you put yourself in anyone else's shoes? We live in a culture that discourages empathy. This culture tells us to be young, rich, fabulous, thin, and entertained. Those in power often encourage these selfish impulses. It is unfair to assume that it's not our faults, and it's not the fault of society that people are still being judged for having a different skin color. And it's a shame that those without money get teased for not having the best and the most expensive things. People believe that the homeless person sleeping on the sidewalk put himself there for being lazy or weak. Don't assume that the Muslim man sitting next to you on the airplane is a terrorist. People have different religions. People have different views. People have different skin colors and incomes. People have different luck in this world. not everyone is perfect. None of us are perfect. You are valid. I promise you. You are valid. You are incredible. You might be perfect at drawing or writing or math or putting on makeup. You might be perfect at any number of things, but you have to remember that being imperfect at one thing doesn't make things you are perfect at less valid. As the doctor states, the world is made up of good and bad things. The good things don't necessarily soften the bad, but vice versa. The bad things don't spoil the good things. It's unimportant. There are people out there who love you and who appreciate you even if you don't think so right now. Things get better. Every single feeling passes. The good moods don't stay, and it's harder to hold on to those and laugh at the same jokes. Yes, it's impossibly easy to cry over the same things, but remember to have empathy for others and for yourself, because if you're alive, you deserve to have good mental health. Unless if you are a terrible murdering rapist, then I actually hate you and you should just get arrested. It is important for you to be aware of multiple emotions that you and others experience. It is also very important to be respectful and listen to others, even if it's a different point of view, even if you disagree with them. The hope is that people choose to broaden their knowledge and empathize more with other human beings. We all know how it feels to be made fun of. Do we really want others to feel the same discomfort? Being ashamed of their own self? Remember to be patient with yourself. Be kind to your brain.